Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Tracking the Tropics. I'm meteorologist Jim Dickey here in the ABC7 Hurricane Center. It's October now, Saturday, October the 6th, to be exact, 2018. And as we get into the month of October, things tend to change a little bit in the Atlantic. Things tend to quiet down a little bit. We are well past the peak of a typical hurricane season. That's in early September. Big part of the reason why is this time of year, we're sort of shutting things down off the coast of Africa. Cape Verde season. That is over and done with. But there still have been a number of storms to impact the United States, hurricanes to impact the United States over the years in the month of October. Coming to mind, Wilma in 2005 that impacted southwest Florida, Sandy in 2012, Nate just last year, Matthew in 2016. So by far and away, hurricane season is not over just yet. And in October, history tells us to keep a close eye close to home. In the Western Caribbean Sea. The colors you're seeing, that is showing you the probability of storms forming, red being the highest probability, and it has a little bullseye there in the Western Caribbean. And then your typical paths. Things tend to form there and drift off to the north as they're picked up by the jet stream, which is starting to swing further southward now that it's fall, and the colder air is starting to move out of Canada and down into the continent of the United States. With that in mind, right on cue, we have an area of low pressure in the Western Caribbean that is showing signs it's going to try to develop as we go through the next couple of days. Get to that in a second. First things first, I want to briefly touch on Leslie, the named storm we still have out there in the Atlantic right now. Leslie is pulling away from the United States and will continue to do so. There is the path. Note the dashed line. That's the path Leslie has taken so far. Just sort of been wandering and zigzagging out there, going back through the past week. It will be another week that we'll still be talking about Leslie here as it dives to the east and southeast, but again, headed away from the United States, not a threat to any land area, certainly not the U.S. or Southwest Florida going forward. We'll be tracking it, but no concerns there. Back to the Caribbean. So you're looking at right now the GFS model forecast, and part of the reason why we tend to see things form in October or this time of year in the Western Caribbean is something that occasionally sets up called the Central American gyre. And it's a broad circulation that occasionally forms, and you can see it on this model right now. When you look south of Central America, you have broad winds, broad flow out of the west and southwest. In the Gulf of Mexico, you have winds out of the east and northeast. That's a broad counterclockwise circulation. That's what we call cyclonic flow. Areas of low pressure form a clockwise circulation. So in some cases, you can take that broad circulation, you can sort of pinch off a more localized little area of low pressure or spin. That's exactly what's going on here. You can see where, when you look towards the Yucatan, the GFS is cutting off a centralized area of low pressure. It's out there right now as I'm recording this. There is a centralized low. As you go forward in time, that drifts northward, and indications are, as it gets to the Gulf of Mexico, conditions become ripe, that this will try to take on those classic tropical characteristics, becoming a tropical storm, becoming a tropical depression at the very least. So this is what this looks like right now, and there's no discernible low-level closed circulation with this at this point in time. Because of that, this has not taken on the depression distinction, the tropical storm distinction. There's a lot of shear involved. You sort of see that. Look at the clouds, how they're moving across northern Mexico, the Yucatan. You have all of that moving westward, even seeing some easterly motion to the cloud coverage in the Bay of Campeche. So, again, wind shear. Winds changing direction and speed. As you go up in the atmosphere, that helps to shear or tear these storms apart as they try to develop. So, no worries just yet. But, again, indications are over the next 24 to 48 hours as this moves across the southwest Caribbean, as this moves into the southern Gulf of Mexico, it will come together. A 90% chance for the NHC that becomes at least a depression in the Gulf early next week. They're saying either Sunday or Monday that this will take on an actual classification. If it becomes a tropical storm, if it reaches that threshold, it would take the name Michael. Now, where will this go? I think it's pretty clear-cut. There's a clear path showing up in the models for where this is likely to go. So this is the upper-level pattern by tomorrow afternoon. We have high pressure, upper-level high pressure, setting up over the southeast. And then, as I talked about, the jet stream is dipping way southward here. This is an anomalously amplified trough, dipping all the way down into northern Mexico. It's the blue you see. And that sets up that path where we have east-southeasterly steering winds coming around that high. We have west-southwesterly steering winds coming around that dip in the jet stream, and that should funnel this thing due north. So this looks like a threat to the northern Gulf Coast, somewhere from the panhandle of Florida, the Big Bend of Florida, all the way west to portions of Louisiana. And as we look at the spaghetti plots, and these are all different models that specialize in tropical forecasting, they show that same thing. They're picking up on that path of least resistance that should steer this to the north. So for our purposes here in southwest Florida, I don't think this comes very close to us, at least the center of it. I think we'll be hard-pressed to see direct impacts from it. Of course, the further east it goes, the more likelihood we have getting into some heavier rain from it. And then, of course, the other question is, what about the intensity? Generally speaking, with these systems that form from the Central American gyres, and especially with this, it looks like it's going to be accelerating. I don't think it's going to have much time or really those ideal conditions to come together into a strong system. My guess is this is a borderline tropical storm, perhaps weak hurricane as it nears landfall, not too unlike Gordon, which hit the northern Gulf Coast earlier this year, not unlike Alberto, which hit the northern Gulf Coast earlier this year. This would be the third impact to the northern Gulf Coast this season from a similar setup. So again, these are model intensity plots, each individual line, different model forecast, and the vast majority of them keeping this in that tropical storm range. That's the green area you see. One model going off the rails and showing this all the way to Cat 4. That's out to lunch. I don't think that is going to come anywhere near that intensity. This is the European forecast model, and I'm showing you the precipitable water, which is moisture content for this thing to work with, and the higher moisture, generally speaking, the better chances for some heavier rain. So by the time we get to Wednesday, there's the center of the storm on this model. It's near the coast of Louisiana, but note all of the red, the deep red showing up. What this is going to do for us in southwest Florida is bring back in tropical moisture, send us back to a more typical rainy season pattern. It's going to be more humid. Our rain chances are going to go up. In all likelihood, we'll be seeing plenty of cloud coverage from this too. But again, like I said, I don't think we see direct impacts from this. And lastly, one last thing I want to hit on. This is the European model. This is an ensemble, so you tweak the initial conditions of that model. You run it a number of different ways, in this case, 51 different ways. And you see what comes out. And this is going 10 days out. So not this coming Tuesday, but 2 Tuesdays from now, October the 16th. And what the European is sort of hinting at is that we might not be done with Genesis from this Central American gyre just yet. A few of the members of the ensemble have been spinning up another potential tropical system next week. So again, or 2 weeks from now, rather. Again, 2 Tuesdays out. And the big takeaway is, yes, September is over and done with. We're past the peak of the hurricane season, but the hurricane season in itself is by no means over just yet. So some takeaways. Leslie, that'll just wander across the Atlantic going through the week. No impacts from land. We'll be watching it, but again, it's headed away from the United States. There will in all likelihood be a depression, if not a tropical storm, in the Gulf of Mexico as we head through the next week, likely making landfall on the northern Gulf Coast, likely bringing indirect impacts to southwest Florida, but at this point in time, direct impacts do not appear likely. And again, hurricane season not over. We are still going to have to watch the Western Caribbean as we go through the next week, 2 weeks. I'll be back with another update on whatever is forming out there early next week, likely Monday or Tuesday, and we'll still be watching that Western Caribbean as well. So until next time, have a good weekend.